welcome back. Thanks for
Thank
coming
you.
back.
Yeah, that was emotional just back there hearing the music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, well, yeah. Let's go back 25 years. When I was doing research on this program, I made a note that because it really struck me that uh, The Sixth Sense was running in cinemas as part of its initial run for like over 9 months, which is insane. Um, through mid-May, and so only a few months later, this movie came out, and so it's an exceptional moment for any filmmaker to be in. That you have this breakthrough, and just a few months later, you're delivering something entirely new to audiences. And so I'm wondering if you can just reflect on this kind of flashpoint period, and I guess just maybe more specifically, like amid this like intense momentum and high pressure, like what drew you to this story for your follow-up?
Yeah, I mean that they were both in the movie theaters in that same year, which is really interesting and obviously on now it seems inconceivable. Um, but really it came from, at that time when I did Sixth Sense, we were editing Sixth Sense and I was writing this, and it's just literally a desperation to write something super fast to get it before anybody fires me or doesn't let me. Assumption was I'm not going to get to make another movie, so I have to, as fast as I can, get there the possibility. It was a different mentality because I made a movie when I was 21, and then I made a movie when I was 24, and then I made Sixth Sense around 27. So it felt like 3 years, and the first two were complete disasters. And so I was like, well, this one's going to be, if it can just make a certain amount of money, I could get another shot. So I was just writing as fast as I could. And that was the mentality, at that point. Maybe I can do this. And then I was making it about comic books, which I loved, and which was a very odd choice back then. I mean, now it seems crazy. There's so many stories about this subject. Because I remember telling the editor, yeah, I'm making a movie about, what if comic books were based on real life? And he was like, what? Because at that time it was perceived very niche, very much like, oh, those are the nerdy dudes that go to the conventions. And the conventions were very kind of not what they are today. And so it wasn't seen as like this big, broader possibility. So yeah, I wrote it, and then and why I paired it with Pulp was because seeing Sam and Bruce together in Pulp was really kind of like the swagger and the spirit of what Quentin did, and it just kind of informed my feelings about it.
Yeah. Well, can you also just talk about working with Bruce Willis at this stage of your respective careers? I mean, for me, like between Sixth Sense and Unbreakable, you gave him these opportunities for incredible, iconic performances, and the performances that showed a very different side of who he was. He was very far away from like the quippy action hero that we knew him, from through like Die Hard or even Die Hard with a Vengeance, like which obviously had paired him with Sam Jackson as well. So I guess I'm curious just how much of his character or his performance in Sixth Sense influenced how you wrote David Dunn with this film.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, I mean, the subject of Bruce is such an emotional one. Everybody needs somebody to believe in them, and he was that guy for me. That he was the tippy top, and I wrote this thing, and meaning Sixth Sense, and he took a swing, and he was that guy. He kind of took swings with a lot of us, with Quentin and Wes and Luc Besson, and just taking real swings with people that were doing different things. And without that, I don't know if this would have anything remotely like what happened. It was Big Brother Bruce that did it, and he has protection and his arms around me. And so, going right away to make another, we got along really, really well. We were very close. I mean, the families are very close even to this day. And so writing something for him was like the natural, the natural feeling.
Yeah. What is there? I don't know. Particular things that you learned from this collaboration that you had? I mean, that you've really continued for, up through 2019 with Glass. It's been a big part of your career.
I've told this story before, but it's an interesting one given what the festival, which was, so it was like the first Friday of the shoot. So we just had shot Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and it was Friday. So the end of the first week of shooting, and we were shooting the marriage flashback in Sixth Sense, and Bruce did his lines, and then he goes, "I think we got it," and he stares at me really hard. And it was literally, when you think back in the moments in your life, what defines you, what kind of person you are, what changes the course of your life. It's not like necessarily the car accident. It's the tiniest little moment of decision. And I remember kind of him staring at me, I guess, however, 27, and I was like, I could just say, check the gate. You say check the gate when you're done shooting a particular shot. And I was like, no. And I went over and leaned in, and he kind of like did this, kind of like you might punch me. And he was like listening with a side eye. And then I was like, emotionally do this. And then he kind of just stared at me. And then I go, roll cameras, roll sound, here we go. And I didn't give him a chance to respond. And then he nails it. That performance is in the movie. And then I was like, check the gate. And I looked at him, and then I was doing something. It was the end of the day, and they said, the AD says, Bruce wants to see you. And I was like, oh man. So then I get like, panicky, and he was a tough dude. He was like, he was an intimidating dude. And then I walk down the sidewalk to go to his trailer, knock on the trailer door. Then he opens the trailer, and again, I'm telling you from a kid's point of view. Like, I'm looking at him, and I'm looking up, and he opens the door, and he has his shirt off with a towel around him, and he's like, he's a movie star. So he's like standing there, and then he goes, I said, you want to talk to me? and he goes, I just wanted to say, I've only felt this one time before, the way you tell stories, and I get this feeling only one time before, and that was with Pulp Fiction and Quentin, and that's it. He goes, that's all I want to say, and then I was like, thanks, Bruce, and then door closes, and I literally skipped down the sidewalk.
He believed in you. I want to actually talk about belief, because I think so many of your films are wrestling with belief in so many different ways. I mean, with Sixth Sense, it's kind of exploring this concept of like trusting the unseen, and even after this, with Signs, believing in higher powers, like extraterrestrial and otherwise, and Unbreakable is like kind of like scrutinizing the real world consequences of like holding an uncommon belief, and also believing in like this higher calling. I mean, in this case, like a higher calling to be a kind of like superhero, but also like a calling to be like a husband and a father. And I guess I just wanted to ask like how you connected these ideas about belief and like higher callings to a story about superheroes.
You're so thoughtful. Your questions. Isn't he so sweet? You really are sweet. Even hearing the music, it feels so much about the things that I was going through or thinking, and there was a little bit of as I was making it even, and there was a change, that kind of a. It's almost like, and I don't think this is just me. I think this is for all of us a little bit, that all of us have this, moment where you realize you're called for something, maybe impactful, and to do and become something in the world, and we're terrified of it, or we press it down, this kind of suppressing our light, and we'll make up all kinds of excuses. My job, this, da 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 da, and really deep down we know we're just kind of afraid of it, and pressing that down, and that feeling of that I felt like it was causing me to have it's in the movie, the grayness, like I wake up with a grayness, and then to have the courage to accept that, and I love making movies, and I love doing all this stuff, but and what comes with making movies for the entire world and fame and all that stuff, and it's scary, and it's painful sometimes, and sometimes like this movie, you have to do something that you believe in, and maybe the world's not 100% there yet. If I could go back and tell myself, the younger version of myself, something, it would have been that, hey, you were onto something. They're just not quite there yet, not quite there yet. I've now learned over the years. By the way, I'm going off tangent here. Just remind me when.
It's a great tangent.
Yeah, so you could just keep bring me back at the end. I've come to understand this relationship with the worldwide audience, with you guys, and I think of it more like restaurateurs now. Like, if there's this restaurant when I grew up, and it was a Chinese food restaurant. It was near where we grew up, and it's decidedly mediocre, and it's packed, and it's still there. 30 years later, still packed. Sometimes, that's almost like, because it's like, I want Chinese food, and then I get Chinese food. And you go, done, and it has this kind of thing. That's not what I'm doing. I'm saying, come to my restaurant, and then you guys say, well, what kind of food is it? And then I'm like, just come to my restaurant. And then the appetizer is sweet, and then it has 4 courses or 7 courses or something. You're like, I don't even know what I'm, right? And so a lot of people are like, yeah, and then they're thinking, 6 months later, they're going, I'm still thinking about that meal. And so you kind of, I'm using all kinds of stuff that I think about, like the SIP test or the take-home test, and mine is the take-home test, the resonance of it. And so having the courage here to tell that kid that, he wouldn't believe that, that comic books would become a mainstream thing, wouldn't believe where we are, or wouldn't even believe the idea of doing a grounded version of this, that it would resonate in that way. And so I was very confused at the time, but about what was happening. But so Unbreakable, a lot of it represents kind of, can you do for the wider audience, not necessarily like a niche audience, but for everyone, can you do something very, very different every single time?
Yeah, I mean, yes, this film anticipates so much, and you mentioned like the grayness that this film had before, and maybe I just, like, in thinking about how much is stolen from this film, I think of just the visual language alone, and just the work you were doing with Eduardo Serra, who sadly passed away last week.
Yeah.
But this film, it's sort of composed of a lot of long takes, comparatively very, very few cuts. There's this play with, the colors green and purple, and I'm just curious. Like, I mean, there's so much of your framing is sort of mimicking comic panels too, and I'm just curious what sort of rules or kind of discussions did you have with Eduardo when you're kind of just charting course on this genre that still barely had a blueprint at that stage?
Eduardo Serra, the DP of the movie, passed away this week, so it's been a kind of a sad thing. And Eduardo, I hired him because I saw his movie Wings of the Dove. And so I thought it was just so beautiful, and it kind of, for whatever reason, I thought matched the world that I had in my head for this movie. And then I was really pushing how to do this. I think there's like 400 cuts in the movie, so it's not that many when you think about it. And they're all pretty much oneers. And so it was almost our shooting day was almost like one shot in the morning, one shot in the afternoon. It was like that. It was like, and it was so complicated to do them. Some of them were so complicated, some of them extremely complicated, like the train shot, which we built, and you kind of built the sets to these complicated shots. But it was a really, Eduardo, even the choice of Eduardo was an aspiration to do something of artistic value, but to do a fun ride for all of us. That kind of that can you do both? And that was the hope. And you know, even like we shot on Fujifilm, which has slightly green patina to it, which you can feel, and they don't make that film anymore, and it's just so beautiful. And it was very, very hard to do the movie. It was the hardest movie. This was the hardest movie because you just don't know whether you're going to get the shot. And it was just, you know, we do 16, 17 takes, but most of it's just like technicality to get it right. And the performances are, you know, have to be there in a kind of play-like way. And but everybody was up for it, which was, you know, exciting.
Okay, the movie's so, I mean, you brought up the train sequence. The movie's so restrained too. I mean, we don't see the train crash. We don't see the accident. I mean, and even this sort of final showdown that happens towards the end is sort of like deliberately kind of unglamorous. I guess very like realistic, and I guess I think that just that feeling of understatement carries through the entire film, and I'm just curious what you felt that kind of restraint was protecting in the story, or what you wanted to kind of protect.
Yeah, I believe, I don't know if we spoke about this before, but I believe as an artist in the value of the incomplete, doing things, don't finish it, and you finish it, and that combination of you and I telling the story, your imagination and my imagination telling the story together is more powerful and stands the test of time, and so don't show it necessarily, and so that restraint is where the power is. It's, you know, I even when you read my scripts, and they're very sparse, and you know, the rumble of a train, and then looking out, and then it's going too fast, or a little girl stare, and then, you know, one of the other motifs in the movie is so then things like, if you're being very minimalistic, then things like the upside down motif in Unbreakable, where the comic book world is, you know, up anytime you see it upside down, and so he would turn the comic book in his lap, and the whole camera turns with him, or Sam falls upside down on the stairs and is looking upside down and sees the silver-handled gun, you know, upside down.
Watching the television.
The little kid watching the television upside down, the little girl looking at him upside down, and that there's another world in our world that's kind of fantastic, you know. Totally random anecdote just popped into my head. On this movie Remain that I just finished, the art department, a lady in the art department came to me and said, I know, I got to tell you, my husband and my son have osteogenesis imperfecta, and they watched this, and so it was and then the son had just broken his first bone, and he was like a little kid, and his life, you know, of being fragile. So it's like, it exists in the world, this incredible continuum of fragility to strength, and what does that mean? And so it's kind of still wondrous to me that we're on a continuum of this. And then I thought, well, if there's people like that have osteogenesis imperfecta in the world, there must be the opposite, but just there's no name for it because they never really get hurt. So superhero.
Out of just what you were saying reminds me also of just James Newton Howard's incredible score, which is also like,
Amazing.
Which is in many ways is also just very understated, but also it's become iconic. I mean, it's a theme that sort of immediately sort of triggers another thought in other films that you make further down the line. And you've worked with James a lot, and I'm just curious, like how you talked about your projects with him, and I guess what specifically were you asking for with Unbreakable?
Yeah, James was very established before I came along, and so we were, 20, 30 years difference in age, and I was like, we're gonna just do everything different. I was so like, we're gonna, so I approached everything very, and hopefully I still do kind of very, very, put myself out there. I mean, I do think that's how we all have to be, kind of like, this version of ourselves has to die so that we can then become the next version, and that process is really difficult for all of us to go into super discomfort. But when you're in your 20s, you kind of take it as everything is new, right? You're becoming a professional, all of that stuff. So saying, I'm going to hire the guy who did Wings of the Dove to do this big comic book movie. Like, that all makes sense somehow. And I'm going to do all oneers. That somehow makes sense. And, you know, he's going to naturally light it in this way, like the car accident with just the flames. And I think for James, we started really daring. Like, we originally were thinking this as an opera. So I was like, this is going to be an opera. So everyone's going to be singing opera. So that's how this was originally. So we tried that for like a month or 6 weeks. It was all opera, and it was you get like how it could be, you know, that, and we just couldn't crack it. And then we started to talk, and then he kept saying, let me bring a little bit of electronic into it. Just let me bring it. That's how he referred to it. Let me just bring a little bit of electronic drive to it. And I was like, what? And then he wrote that main theme, and I was like, wow, this is, you know, we were talking about a kind of like a fugue, a growing movement of it building. You go this, like almost like a raga, you know, like it grows and grows. That's what you're hearing, that kind of, that it's rising and rising and rising and rising, and you can't stop it. And so that was underneath it. And what I'll do is I'll write like very, you know, super weirdly poetic stuff to him about like it represents this and that, and he somehow gets it, whatever I'm going for.
Okay, I have more questions, but I will open it up to the audience right now. I just ask whoever I pick on, please wait for a microphone because we're recording it. So we'll go with you right here in the front. Yeah.
Awkward pause.
Hi, thank you for being here. I flew in from Texas this morning to be here, so I'm a little tired, but I'm gonna try and get this right.
Yeah, brother. Thank you.
I have it written down. You touched on this a little bit earlier. You talk a lot about your belief that everyone is extraordinary. It's something that shines in a lot of your movies, and especially in this one as well. I wondered if you could talk about your process of maintaining that connection to your most honest, most powerful voice in a world that's very noisy, that constantly tries to put people in a box and tell them who and what they should be, and when making creative decisions. And how has that process changed since making this movie, you know, telling the difference between what's coming from my voice and what's coming from other people's voices in my head?
Wow, man. Very, very deep. I mean, it is something that it's the primary questions of my life. This thing here, that do we all have, and it's my belief that all of us have a very singular power with our voice. If it's specific, if you really, then it's unmatched. You know, I did like one day when I went into a class with Teach for America, and it was in a struggling school, and it was an English class, and then all the teachers were there, and everybody came in, and there was a girl in the front row, and she was not interacting, and I'd say half the kids knew who I was, you know, and but the other half were still excited because they were getting it. But this one girl was like this, and she was like this, away from everyone and overweight, and no one was talking to her, and they were like, I said to them, I just wanted to wake them up, and I said, I think at that time I said this. This is very provocative what I'm going to say, and I said, and it was intended for them. I said, I think word for word I'm the highest paid writer in the world. And I said, how did that happen? And then the kids, I asked questions, the kids were like, luck. And I was like, yeah, I'm lucky. They're hard work. I'm like, I work hard, but there are probably others that work harder. And they had answers, and then I said, I thought about this, and I said to them, I just think I'm just a little more me than others are willing to be them. And then I turned to her and I said, if you can tell me, right, why you're sitting like that, with that look, in this seat, and the intercom had just come on, the principal had just said something, but you couldn't hear him because the speaker's broken. So you just get like that. What it's like to be in this seat, why you have that look, what it's like to listen to a speaker where the principal, you can't hear him. If you can do that, you'll beat me, Quentin, anyone else who ever writes, right? Because you are so powerful. And she kind of looked at me, and I'm like, this is the truth. You could get the whole world to understand what it's like to be in that seat right there, and that's that. You know, and so it's the same thing with Unbreakable and all of this stuff, and I do believe that we all get talked out of it, and I've been talked out of it, and I have been talked out of it. That's not going to work, you know. There's endless stories. endless people passing, endless studios, endless, and all, even rejected from the audience at the moments, you know? It's just endless, you know? And somehow you have to go, they'll hear me. They'll hear me at some point, you know, that they'll understand what this operatic movie about superheroes, what does it mean? It's about the things we're talking about right now that I truly believe in. And I feel the lie when I meet someone that doesn't believe this. Or they think it's just me that's special. I'm like, that's not the case. I'm not. It's the same thing. Just someone you have to believe in it, and you're there, and it'll do something that's unbelievably extraordinary. That's what I genuinely believe. But so that's in through the whole thing. I think a little bit of waking up, and oftentimes it's crisis or some kind of trauma that pushes us to do that. And so a lot of my characters have to go through trauma in that classic way, and then come out with some strength. By the way, you're wearing this sweater from Trap. I cannot believe this. Literally, I'm even having a hard time answering his question because I'm staring at him and I'm like, you're wearing the sweater that the serial killer wore in Trap.
Down for Halloween. I saw that movie 20 times in theaters.
Oh, thanks, bro. Thank you so much. I'm like, am I losing my mind? Am I just seeing everything I want to see? That's so sweet. Thank you for the question.
Okay, we'll go further in the back. You in the center, big shoes to fill. Yeah, like right in the center of the headphones. You have headphones?
While they're doing that, I'll tell you another story that just popped into my head, which was I got a call from the studio, the head of the studio, when this came out, and he's like, you know, the cinema score came in, and it's a C cinema score, and this was his way of, like, you know, motivating me, and I was like, really? And I'm like, yeah, you know, this is that in the restaurateur thing. They didn't know what they ate. So you're getting questionnaires afterwards going, did you like it? Is this what, you know? And they're not sure, right? And so he was like, you know, and I was like, gosh, I remember exactly where I was when he called me too. I pulled the car over, he called me, I took the call. And I'm like, am I just losing it? Am I just, you know, going off, you know, being indulgent, you know, which can happen for sure. I mean, we have, you know, more often than not, that's what happens. You just start telling stories that nobody cares about. And I'm like, is this what's happening here? And so, but it was a little bit of this, you know, throughout just kind of going, you know, it's right. It's just that, you know, even in that, the way we sold the movie was wrong in the sense that they tried, if you go back and look at the materials, we sold it as a eerie thing on a train, and it's like almost like a cousin of Sixth Sense or something. What? You know, say, you know, the line, I think you're a comic book, I think you're a superhero, real life superhero. Say that. Sorry about that. Go ahead. What's your question?
No worries. Hi, I'm like 17 and I really want to direct films, and you're like a massive inspiration.
Thank you so much.
Never seen this one before until now, so seeing it on film was amazing. But I was just curious, so even like, especially for Trap, because that was my first film I saw of yours, and I adored it. And I'm just curious, how much of the visual language of the film do you have even in your head, or do you develop before you even start writing the script?
Did you say how old are you, did you say?
17.
You're 17? That's so amazing. Thank you. It's there, it grows in a snowball, and you're open to kind of certain paintings and photographs and movies, and it starts to come, but it comes very organically for me, and then it becomes the law. So like on the movie I just did, because it's fresh, I can tell you, you know, where it came from. Like I would see photographs. A DP who's a Brazilian DP who had never shot in the United States. He would show me things, and I picked him so I could think differently, so I can stop thinking I need to die and start all over again, you know. And so he's kind of bringing me all this stuff of like photograph of hands, like that intertwining fingers, and I'm like, Oh, I know how that works in our movie. Or he was like, have you seen the Cabinets of Dr. Caligari? And I was like, because something, when he read the script, something about that. Then I watched that movie, and then I was like, wow, this German surrealism, this is important for our movie. There's a festival of the movie, let's make it that. So it just starts snowballing all these styles, and then we come with a language, a vocabulary for what the movie is. And so that becomes law. In Unbreakable, it's upside down or whatever it is. Or our use of color, we didn't use primary colors unless you see it, like the inside of the flap of the outfits. All the comic book colors are all kind of hidden, and then they come out in those moments there. But it's being inspired by other artists at that moment. I'm like an antenna at the beginning of a movie like that, and everything starts coming, and you go, and you take it as the universe a little bit. I mean, I do that. I was meant to see that. I was meant to read that. I was meant to go to that, and grab those images and stuff. So it's a sacred part of the ritual of making the movie, and then we shoot just what I drew. That's it. So those movies are exactly as I drew them, and we can show you the storyboards, the drawings of this, and it's like a comic book version of what you just saw.
Thank you so much.
Good luck, by the way, brother.
Thank you.
Did you ever intend to shoot the train
Say it again?
crash? Did you ever intend to shoot the train crash?
No, just to see the aftermath on the television.
Yeah, right in the blue, right. Yeah, right there.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm an assistant location manager on movies and TV shows, and in your opinion, what makes a great location manager?
Wow, that's great. You know, it's funny. The location manager is so critical. They're a big part of the movie, and I'm always pushing the location managers to. Do you know how much you impact us? They are the brother and sister of the production designer, and so it's critical, absolutely critical. What those stairs that Sam goes down, they become iconic and metal and and harsh, and there's no humanity in it, and there's red in there, and there's all that stuff. Or in Trap, we found this stadium, and we shot the whole movie in that stadium, and it's an old stadium. They're going to tear it down. They were about to tear it apart. I said, don't do it. Can I shoot in it? And it's so beautiful. So the bathroom has red tiles in it. It looks like some Kubrick movie, and all that is all really there, and it's from a different era, and it's kind of the fancy of this particular stadium in this particular place in the world. And so it's a critical part of it. I mean, we just shot a movie in Rhode Island, and I spent the whole time looking for one house, just looking for some house to speak to me like this, like an artist, to find something that goes, that's that combination of things, the stone, how big the hallways are, whatever it is, it just makes sense. It's so critical. I think it's one of the most undervalued positions on the movie.
Okay, we'll get right in the center. Yes, you. Yeah.
Hey, M. Night, huge
brother.
fan for my entire life. Love this film, huge inspiration to me. Love this whole trilogy, actually. And I've been needing to ask you this question for years, so just bear with me. I'm from Philadelphia, and I got invited to a rough cut screening of Glass.
Whoa.
And there was like 3 hours long, and there was an extended sequence after the credits that was like 3 parts and really cool.
Yeah.
And it didn't make it into the final film. I was wondering if you would be able to share that ending with the audience and then explain why it didn't make it in.
It's so funny. We were at our friend's house who are here, and they said, "Are you gonna ever shoot something in Korea?" And I said, "The Korean." And I said, I didn't say it last night, so I can say it now. They're actually here. I did. In my mind, I shot the end of Glass, which was basically like, it was actually, the word got out at the end of Glass that there are real life comic book heroes and villains in the world. Like there's real versions, and that knowledge started to awaken the extraordinary in everybody. They started to realize, wait a minute, that thing, that itch, that thing I'm feeling, that's me, that's real. And so I made like 3 situations where it came out. like that they were awakening. One was in Korea, and one was in Paris, and one was in Brazil, I think, right? And I'm going to give you an unsatisfactory answer for this part of it, which is, and it's because I'm not satisfied with myself, so it's gonna not feel great. So, which is, we were rushed for time. It was so complicated what we were doing. I needed more time, and the audience when we were showing it was buckling, and there were people that were telling me that that's too much to do at the end, and it was like, these aren't with our main characters, they're not with Bruce and all these guys, and with James and Sam, and so, you know, maybe this isn't the way to do it, and I just couldn't deal with it, and I was like, let's just do the cleaner version. But I even literally last night I was thinking about it, and again, a lot of this is a battle between what I'm saying to you, which you know I believe, and yet I want to be accepted. I don't want to get hurt. I want to be okay. I want to be, you know, sometimes I don't want to be extraordinary. I just want to be ordinary and just be like regular. But that's me, crushing my own light, you know, to be safer. And so even that answer, the answer is probably was a coward. Honestly, I didn't have the time to, and I keep saying time like that's an excuse. And but again, it's interesting, a trilogy about being extraordinary, and then I was like, should I cut the part about everybody else being extraordinary? Because I'm scared, because I don't know if everybody will like me, and I don't know if they'll yell at me, and so it was not a great answer. It's just me being cowardly and not. I wish I could say with conviction, I know why I didn't put it in. That's not the case. In fact, the guy who runs my company and we were like, we should have just put it in. We say it all the time.
Okay, we'll go way in the back. Yes. Yeah. I guess, meanwhile, who saw Unbreakable for the first time tonight? Okay.
A good handful.
Hey, man, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. This movie was a huge moment for my father and I. Some of like the earliest memories with my dad are both being in the movie theater and at the comic book shop. So thank you for this. Also, Elijah Price's like padded interior car is probably the coolest thing I've ever seen. So thank you for that too. My question was, in the writing process, were there ever, did you ever considering like this is like grounding superpowers in the real world, were there ever any other powers considered for David Dunn? And considering that David Dunn and Elijah Price are two ends of the same spectrum, who came first?
Those are great. Yeah, I mean, in my mind, I mean, maybe you don't know, but originally Split was inside Unbreakable, so that there was like a three-hander in the outline. And I just was so large and so unwieldy. And every time I went to Kevin Wendell Crumb's story, it felt the most highest stakes were there. And so it was pulling from this quiet way I wanted to tell the story with these two guys. So I pulled him out. For Bruce's character, it's really, David was meant to just be kind of this not realizing that you've never, I was in a football game or this and I never got hurt. And then he fakes his own injury. And then when he's in a car accident where the car was so damaged and you should have been hurt and you weren't hurt. All the kind of doing the math, like that scene where he's talking to his wife and asking, have I ever been sick? No, ever. Have I ever been sick? Those are kind of like you realizing in retrospect so that quietness was really important to me. But in my head, I always come up with, characters and for a world. Like sometimes I'm like, maybe I should just done like what Stan did, Stan Smith, Stan Lee, and just character after character after character, because I really love that, coming up with characters like that in a grounded world. And a little bit like, back to my cowardice, that little bit was 3 more characters that I created at the end of Glass was for that. And now I have another teenage girl character that's in my head that maybe one day will come out. But so there's a lot of times I feel like maybe I didn't follow my voice strong enough. at these moments. So, but it's so hard to do. You know, in the arena. You know what I mean? Like you're in the arena fighting, and you get scared sometimes doing it. But Unbreakable for me represents the way I wish I was all the time. The courage that that he had at that time, and I've lost it sometimes, and then try to get it back.
Do we have time for more?
Yeah. Let's do one or two more.
Okay, we'll get you on the side right here, right at the end.
Yeah.
And then
These are great questions, guys.
Thank you so much for giving us this movie and all your movies. This film and this sorry, my stutter. And this trilogy. A lot of people, when they talk about it, they say that they love Unbreakable, they love Split, they love the first two acts of Glass, and then they say, oh, but why did you drown David Dunn in a puddle? And I could sort of understand what they were saying until I went back and I saw the movie on the big screen here last week and today. And there's this beautiful line that when Elijah's on the phone with David Dunn, after he finally knows that he really is the one, he tells him that it's okay to be scared. Real life is not like a comic book. It doesn't fit into little frames. And I was wondering if that kind of connects maybe to the real Bruce and David Dunn as well, because there is this rumor around that you kind of had to change the third act of Glass because of Bruce's tragic condition. And I wonder if you could talk to that, if there was another version of the third act of Glass, or if there is, if you could tell us what that was.
Thank you for your question. No, there wasn't anything related to Bruce's situation. For me, it was I didn't want it to just become like morph into a Marvel movie at the end. You know, I just didn't want it just to become like an extravaganza. And I had a couple of thoughts. It was always there was in one. You know, it was one that was like it would end at a comic book convention in Philly. And that's where Elijah wanted to go, you know, at the end. And even literally, it was like a physical thing. How can I shoot this, you know? And I had in my head like I was going to like see if I could go to Kevin Feige and ask him, can I borrow your characters to just be at the Comic-Con and watch my characters? Like the actors promoting that would be looking out the window and seeing these guys, the real versions. That was my like big thing. I was like, can I even pull this off? And you know, the way I'm making these movies, you know, way I've been making them, you know, I pay for them, and there's real restraint. I literally had I used my on Glass, like we were down, like I was out. Like that was it. There was no more money, and so it's like literally the practice. I know it sounds crazy, but these are independent movies, and I'm making them outside the studio system, and so I just literally couldn't pull that off. But the idea of they never leave the parking lot, and this is Glass. You know, the idea that he's very fragile. That it's just a human being at the end of the day. You know, for me, the poignancy of that, and maybe what I wanted to say, and that's always been the case with this trilogy to some extent, what I want to say has bumpers on it a little bit in a way that's rough, you know. And, you know, there is the other version, like if I was a gun for hire, there's a version there that I know what the Chinese restaurant version is, and I could, you know, could go do that, and maybe there was something in between, because you don't want to be rebellious either. You don't want to be disdain for what the audience wants. That's not at all how I feel. I want us to be completely in sync spiritually and what we want from each other. And so so I, you know, it's a complicated answer, but the idea of like they didn't even make it to the Marvel version. The Marvel version's over there, and they didn't make it, and it's just not the way these three movies are. And so that, you know, that I hope that answers it a little bit. Thank you for your question.
All right, we'll take one last.
While the microphone's going over there, I told this story the other night. I don't know if any of you guys were here, but when we screened Split, we screened it in a surprise screening in Austin. And we screened it, and they didn't know what it was. And so the movie comes on, they're watching the whole movie, and then at the end, this music comes on, and in the last minute and a half, and literally the theater started going insane. They were like, they thought it was temp music maybe in the movie, that I put my own music as temp music, and then you see everybody like leaning forward and looking at each other and wait, what? And it was just, you could feel it was like a rumble. It was so magical to be in there, that moment in this place, because it was like, you were like, it was intense, like blogosphere, like comic book fans, and it was intense. And then as that happened, and then the explosion that happened when Bruce's character showed up. Where's your question? So what was on the right side? There you go.
In bonus feature interviews about deleted scenes in Unbreakable and Split, you've talked about feeling a push and pull between plot-driven writing based in the mechanics of genre, whether it's suspense or horror or thriller, and more character-driven, almost plotless slice-of-life writing. How would you say this tug of war has evolved between Unbreakable and Split, and how has it continued to morph in the decades since?
Amazing questions, you guys. Just amazing, so thoughtful. You know, I used to talk about it as kind of like a graph. And you know, if in a novel, let's say if I was a novelist, you have the width, which let's say is like the characters and the depth of the world and the feeling of everything, and then the vertical is the plot. And you don't really need to go that high. It's not necessary in that format at all to go. It could be a person's life on the day of their day. He's a post office worker, and the day and you do it beautifully, and it's just incredibly broad and beautiful on this graph. But it doesn't have to go that way. In film, it's a structure-driven format, first of all, because it's screenplay. And of course, as you can do variations on that graph, and they kind of call it in the broadest of ways like independent. Like you're getting that slice of life thing. The more you do that, and the lower the plot-driven axis is, and then as you go that way, and it's something. And we've seen those movies where it's so you did it on the bomb and the ding and the car diamond and the thing, and then it goes like that, but it's very narrow. Right, on the width scale for character and depth and all of those things that are just kind of causing the resonance and all of that stuff. So it's finding that appropriate thing. And once you pick genre, you're automatically like shooting through this vertical. And so can you do finding ways, format-wise and things for myself to get as wide as I can do these character things? Because as soon as the stakes start rising and it becomes life and death, it's very hard to have a character moment. The pressure, the audience starts getting, angry. They want to go to the next movement up in that vertical, and you can feel that thing. And the audience is literally like, I used to call it the bathroom test. So when we screen a movie, how many times do you guys go to the bathroom, and where do you go to the bathroom? Because you forget your body when I'm doing it right. And all of you just forget, and you're watching, and then the movie finishes, and then you run to the bathroom, right? And it's like, but whenever there's this in this graph, whenever you're not quite doing it properly, and you're going, okay, it's whispering to the audience, this is where we're doing character work, and they're like, I'll be back, I gotta. And they're like, tell me what happens, and they go, oh, they're doing character work. Almost everybody's like brilliant at this automatically without even knowing, and they literally you'd be in some mall in New Jersey, and they're like, I'm gonna be right back, and they go and they come back, and because they've lost. And when I say something is slow, that just means, and I tell this to other filmmakers or editors, when something is slow, it just means I don't know where I am in the story. That's all that means. It doesn't mean bad or good. Just the diner scene went on too long. We're in the middle of the movie, and why are we here? Oh, this is where he gets his partner, and it goes, that's where you are in the plot. So you're bound by that vertical of the plot in the screenwriting of it. And so you can kid yourself and keep going and do all that character work, but then half the audience is going to go to the bathroom, even metaphorically, I'm saying. But they're saying, hey, you didn't do the balance correctly. And of course you can jettison all the width and just do plot, right? But then that's not satisfying at all. It doesn't stay with you. So this struggle between these two verticals has been the thing that I think about. And oftentimes when I think of an idea like Trap or something like that, it has inherently in it like the idea of a girl whose dad takes her to the concert, and then he's caught in a trap because he gets outed that he's a serial killer, and he's feeling for the first time, and he's never tried to evade the police while he's had his daughter, and that's his kryptonite. And so that's interesting. I get to do character work with this strong vertical. So like as I'm thinking of ideas, they're kind of sneaking in there, the character work.
All right. Oh, I gotta go to the bathroom. No, Knight, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, guys.